In international law, a concession is a territory within a country that is administered by an entity other than the state which holds sovereignty over it. This is usually a colonizing power, or at least mandated by one, as in the case of colonial chartered companies. Usually, it is conceded, that is, allowed or even surrendered by a weaker state to a stronger power. For example, the politically weak and militarily helpless Qing China in the 19th century was forced to sign several so-called unequal treaties by which it gave, among other rights, territorial concessions to numerous colonial powers, European as well as America, creating a whole host of territorial concessions in China in addition to even more numerous treaty ports where China retained territorial control. However, just as with permanent sales of territory, there are cases when concession has been entered upon voluntarily by power which could have resisted the demand, believing the arrangement to the mutual interest, or as part of a more complexly balanced deal. In the many cases where the terms of the contract provides for similar terms as an ordinary property lease, notably a term limited in time and usually an indemnity sum, the territory can be called more precisely a leased territory. A leased territory. The term is not to be confused with territorial concession, which applies to any clause in a treaty whereby power renounces control over any territory, usually in the form of a full and indefinite transfer, often without any indemnity. Austro-Hungarian concession holders. One of the concessions in Tianjin, in China, officially surrendered by Austria in 1919 and Hungary in 1920 respectively. Belgian concession holders. The Guatemalan Parliament issued a decree on 4 May 1843 by virtue of which the district of Santo Tomas was given in perpetuity to the compagnie.Belge de colonization, a private Belgian company under the protection of King Leopold I. Belgian colonizing efforts ceased after a few years due to the lack of financial means and the harsh climate. The Lado enclave in the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan leads to the Congo Free State. Belgian concession in Tianjin. British concession holders, held by Great Britain on 9 June 1898. The new territories were leased from China for 99 years as a leased territory under the Convention for the Extension of Hong Kong Territory. On 19 December 1984, the UK agreed to restore all of Hong Kong, including the territories ceded in perpetuity, to China on 1 July 1997. On 20 November 1846, a British concession in Shanghai was established. On 27 November 1848, this concession was expanded, but on 21 September 1863 an international settlement in Shanghai was created by union of the American and British concessions. The British concession in Tianjin, in which the trade centered, was situated on the right bank of the River Piho below the native city, occupying some 200 acres. It was held on a lease in perpetuity granted by the Chinese government to the British Crown, which sublet plots to private owners in the same way as at Hankou. The local management was entrusted to a municipal council organized on lines similar to those at Shanghai. The British concession on the Shamian Island in Guangzhou. Privately held Tati Concessions land 1872 to 1911 in a small part of present Botswana, detached from the Matable Kingdom. Canadian concessions. Following the First World War, the Republic of France granted Canada perpetual use of a portion of land on Vimy Ridge under the understanding that the Canadians were to use the land to establish a battlefield park and memorial. The park, known as the Canadian National Vimy Memorial, contains an impressive monument to the fallen, a museum and extensive recreations of the wartime trench system, preserved underground tunnels and cemeteries. Chinese concessions. Between 1882 and 1884, the Qing Empire obtained concessions in Korea and in turn Busan and Wonsan. The concessions were occupied by Japan in 1884 after the outbreak of the First Sino-Japanese War. After China's defeat in that war, Korea declared the unequal treaties with Qing China to be void, and unilaterally withdrew the extraterritoriality and other powers granted to China in respect of the concessions. The concessions were formally abolished in 1898. French concessions. The 6th of April 1849, French concession in Shanghai established. The 17th of July 1854, municipal council established, relinquished by Vichy France to a Japan-sponsored puppet government in China, formally returned to China by France in 1946. Tianjin. One of the concessions in Hankou. The French concession on the Shamian Island in Guangzhou. German concessions, all in China. On the 6th of March 1898, Qingdao was leased for 99 years to Germany. It was already occupied by Germany since the 14th of November 1897. On the 23rd of August 1914, Republic of China cancelled the German lease. The concession was occupied by Japan on the 7th of November 1914. One of the concessions in Tianjin. One of the concessions in Hankou. Italian concession. A concession zone in Tianjin was conceded to the Kingdom of Italy by Qing China on the 7th of September 1901. It was administered by Italy's consul and had a population of 6,261 in 1935, including 536 foreigners. Several ships of the Italian Royal Navy were based at Tianjin. During World War II, the primary Italian vessels based at Tianjin were the mine layer Lepanto and the gunboat Carlotto. On the 10th of September 1943, the Italian concession at Tianjin was occupied by Japan. In 1943, Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini's Italian Social Republic relinquished the concession to the Japanese-sponsored Chinese National Government, a Japanese puppet state led by Wang Jingwei. It was never recognized by the Kingdom of Italy, the Republic of China, or most world governments. On the 10th of February 1947, by peace treaty, the zone was formally returned to nationalist China by the Republic of Italy. Japanese concessions. In China, the only non-Western concession in Tianjin, the only non-Western concession in Hankou. In Korea, before the annex of Japan, Korea, Busan. In turn, Portuguese concession, Macau. Around 1552 to 1553, the Portuguese obtained permission to establish a settlement as a reward for defeating pirates and to mediate in trade between China and Japan and between both nations and Europe. It was leased from the Empire of China from 1670. The concession turned into a Portuguese colony in mid-19th century. The Chinese government assumed sovereignty over Macau on the 20th of December 1999, ending 329 years of Portuguese colonial rule. Russian concessions. One of the concessions in Tianjin, one of the concessions of Hankou, a peninsula near the Finnish capital Helsinki, was leased for a period of 30 years by the Soviet Union from its northwestern neighbor and former possession in personal union, Finland, for use as a naval base in the Baltic Sea, near the entry of the Gulf of Finland, under the Moscow Peace Treaty that ended the Winter War on 6 March 1940. During the Continuation War, Soviet troops were forced to evacuate Hankou in early December 1941, and the USSR formally renounced the lease, early given the original term until 1970, in the Paris Peace Treaty of 1947. The role of the Hanko naval base was replaced by Porkala, another Finnish peninsula a bit farther east at the Gulf of Finland. In the armistice between Finland and the Soviet Union of the 19th of September 1944, it was returned to Finland in January 1956. In both cases, the Soviets limited themselves to a military command, without any civilian administration. U.S. concessions. Guantanamo Bay, lease from Cuba under 1903 and 1934 treaties in perpetuity, no civilian administration, only military command. 2. In Imperial China, 1848 54th American concession in Shanghai established. Until on 21 September 1863 an international settlement in Shanghai was created by union of the American and British concessions. One of the concessions in Tianjin. The numerous cemeteries and monuments administered by the American Battle Monuments Commission. These are located in Belgium, Cuba, France, Gibraltar, Italy, Luxembourg, Mexico, Morocco, the Netherlands, the Northern Mariana Islands, Panama, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, Tunisia, and the United Kingdom. The most popular sites among these are the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial in France and the John F. Kennedy Memorial at Runnymede, United Kingdom. Jointly held concessions. The 21st of September 1863 an international settlement in Shanghai was created by union of the American and British concessions. In 1896 the concession was expanded. On the 7th of July 1927, the Chinese city government of Greater Shanghai was formally established. In January-February 1931, the Japanese occupied the Hongkou district, and on the 9th of November 1937 the Chinese city of Shanghai. But only on the 8th of December 1941 would Japanese troops occupy the international settlement. It was dissolved by Japan in 1942. In February 1943 the settlement is officially abolished by the US and Britain. In September 1945 the last territory is restored to China. Beijing Legation Quarter, a de facto concession. Foreign concessions in China. Concessions in Tianjin, Chinese Eastern Railway Zone, Guangzhou, Kwantung Lease Territory, Shanghai International Settlement, Shanghai French Concession. List of foreign enclaves in China.